Greetings from Saguaro National Park near Tucson, Arizona. This place is unique and super cool. One of the things that's interesting about it is that it's right on the edge of Tucson. It's basically in the city. But the most fascinating part about this park is the Swirl Cactus. It's a very unique, cool cactus, iconic image of the desert Southwest. You think of like Old West movies and stuff. A lot of times they're in the background. But not only are they cool to look at, but they're a keystone species. So they're a very significant part of the ecology around here. And so I'm looking forward to showing you more about how the birds and the bats and stuff really need it to survive. It's really awesome. Also, there's some sky islands here. A sky island is a mountain in the desert. And so it's a total different world once you go up into the mountains versus the desert. And sometimes around here you hear people say, "So where are you today?" So where are you today? I'm good. All right, let's go check this park out. All right, here I am next to a really awesome saguaro cactus. This is a nice big one. It's got some beef to it. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 big arm in the back, 7 arms. It's probably 20, 30 feet high. These things can get up to like 50 feet high. They grow very slowly when they're young. They 1 to 1.5 inches over like the first 8 years, but then they do pick up the pace. It takes a while for them to grow arms. It takes about 35 years for them to get an arm, and they want to get more arms because it increases their chances of survival because they can store more water, and also proliferating the species by having some more arms that they can have some more flowers. And all right, here's a good factoid that might help you in trivia someday. The Arizona state flower is the Saguaro Blossom. It's a beautiful white flower that shows up in the springtime only for about 24 hours. But they do show up on different ones over a 2-month period. So if you come here in the spring, you'll see these nice flowers. And that's when it gets exciting for the birds, bees, and bats, right? The saguaro cactus is considered a keystone species. What does that mean? Well, basically say like a keystone is a critical piece of an arch. If it's missing, the arch will collapse. It is absolutely critical for these things, birds and bees and bats, to survive. They use them for nests. We'll get to that later. But also the flowers. So when the flower comes out, now the birds and bees are like, "Oh, sweet," pun intended, because there's some nectar in there, right? They'll go in there, get some of that yumminess, and they'll get some pollen on them, and they'll cross-pollinate. So they'll go to another saguaro flower, and some of that pollen will get in that flower, and then seeds can form. Most of those seeds never become saguaros. They actually get eaten by a lot of birds, but some of them do. Some of them make it. But so there's that. Also, some fruit will form, and birds love the fruit, and people have eaten that fruit for thousands of years. There have been people here for like 12,000 years, they say, and eating that fruit is probably pretty yummy. I'd like to have some of that. One of the main issues out here in the desert is be able to survive with a lack of water, right? And the way it does it is it's able to gather a lot of water with its roots and store that water for a long time. So the root, there's one root that goes straight down like a meter, and then there are a bunch of roots that go out just below the surface, something like 30 meters out. So it's got a lot of coverage that it can get water. These things can soak up a lot of water. Inside, there's some spongy material. And you can see these pleats on the outside. There's a pleat, and they can open up and stretch out like that, like an accordion, like they say, in order to get a little water. And yeah, they can store so much water that they can get a lot of weight. These things can weigh up to like 6 tons, 12,000 pounds. Each arm, hundreds of pounds. There's a story about a guy in 1982 who decided he wanted to go out and, for fun, shoot down some saguaros. Well, turns out one of the saguaros, who's about 10 feet away, had an arm that fell off, crushed the guy. That was the end of him. They say that arm weighed about 500 pounds. And some say it was poetic justice. He got what he deserved, but it is what it is. There's a really good song by a group called the Austin Lounge Lizards called Saguaro. Highly recommend checking it out. Look it up. It's a cool song about that guy's final moments. All right, check out this awesome saguaro. This thing is huge. It's probably 40 feet up. They say they can get up to like 50 feet high. It's pushing it. They also say they can live like 150 to 200 years old, and it's pushing it because we know this thing's old because not only how big it is, but how many arms it has, something like 10 arms, and they're huge arms. And as you can see, many birds use the saguaros for nesting. Actually, there are some like woodpeckers that'll get in there and try to get the larvae. There'll be some other birds that will come in afterwards. So once there's a hole created, they'll be like, hey, thanks for making the hole. I could use it. So the saguaro doesn't like a hole in it. And what it will do, it actually will create like some callus tissue. There's like some sappy stuff that comes out of it to try to cover the hole. And that sappy stuff can harden into a boot-like thing. They call them saguaro boots. They kind of look like booties. The local Native Americans way back when used to use these saguaro boots as like water jugs. Something that's really interesting that can happen, it's very rare, but a saguaro can become a crested saguaro. So check this out. It kind of looks like a piece of broccoli at the top. If you cut it in half, it fans out like that, and it looks interesting. And one of the things that's interesting about it is that scientists don't know why it does that, what happens. So some people say it's disease, some people say it's weather. So maybe if you come to the park, you'll be the person that figures it out. I'm hanging out next to a cholla cactus. Just like most things in the desert, this thing's got thorns on it. Do not want to touch it. Had a bad experience once where I actually ended up touching one, and a lot of these thorns have barbs in them. They have these little hooks in them, so they get in there and you try to pull them out, and it actually kind of stuck a little bit. No fun. Of course, a lot of these things have thorns to protect from, they want animals, whatever, coming and eating their stuff. Yeah, these guys are all a little on edge. They need to chill out a little bit. I get it. They got a lot of things trying to eat their stuff. It just feels like they're like too paranoid about everything. Y'all need to just take it easy a little bit. You don't need to show your thorns so much. I don't know. All right, I'm hanging out next to something called the barrel cactus. It's appropriately named. It's a cactus. It looks like a barrel. One of the cool things about this is that it always leans to the south. It's like, hey, sun, you're that way? I'm going to lean you that way. I like the sun. So if you're ever not sure where south is, look for a barrel cactus out here, and it'll give you a general idea. Look at these cool little fruit type things. They look kind of like little pineapples. Maybe it could be the pineapple cactus. All right, I'm hanging out next to a prickly pear cactus. It's a cactus. It's prickly. And it creates a pear type thing, this fruit. A lot of people will take off and use for jelly. Oftentimes on these things, it looks like an animal is bitten off it. It's probably a javelina. There is this hog-like looking thing out here that's called a javelina. I haven't seen one. They're pretty hard to find, but they seem pretty cool. But yeah, they just chomp down on these things. They don't care if there's thorns on them. These things are ruthless about that. And there's a question of, are these succulents? Have you heard this term succulent before? I've heard it before. I got some cool Christmas socks. I had pictures of these little desert plants, and it said, "What's up, sucker?" And I wasn't really sure what a succulent is, but it turns out a succulent is just any sort of desert plant that has some mushiness, like some sponge to it, that can soak up water and store that water. So that's definitely a necessary thing for most of the plants out here. So are cactus succulents? Yes. So all succulents are cactus? No. There's a wide range of succulents, and cactus is just part of that. But there you go. So that's what a succulent is. They call them the prickly pear cactus, but I like to call them the Mickey Mouse cactus. You can see how the big ears are there and the face. A little imagination. Yeah. All right, I'm standing next to a jumping cholla cactus. These things are interesting. Kind of look like they have some sort of cool braided hairstyle, right? But see how it hangs down like this? And then there's some nasty thorns on it. If you get close to it, a thorn will catch you, and these arms easily swing out. When you walk away, it pulls off. So you walk away with a piece of it, and then you can help it proliferate the species. And it's not very nice if you're helping it, but then it just gives you a nasty thorn, painful. Now, one of the cool things about this park is that it's not just about the saguaros. It also has some good mountains back here. These are the Rincon Peaks. This is all part of Saguaro National Park East. These mountains go from like 3,000 feet at the base upwards to like 8,500. Mica Mountain back there is the highest point. There's also Rincon Peak, almost as high, 8,500 or so. Now, these mountains around here in the desert are called sky islands because these are different worlds once you go up there. You have desert at the base, but you have pine trees and much cooler weather up there. So it's really neat that you can go through so many different vegetation zones from the base to the top. They say like 6 different biota communities. It's the same amount of vegetation zones that you would experience going from Mexico up to Canada. How awesome is that? Like, some people do the Pacific Crest Trail. It's like 2,000 some miles. It takes like 6 months to go from Mexico to Canada. You can come over here in like 3 or 4 days. You can go through just as many vegetation zones. Just as good of an experience, right? All right, maybe not, but still, it'd be awesome. Question is, how did these mountains form? There was a lot of mountain development in the Intermountain West because the Pacific Plate was moving underneath the North American Plate. But then about 15 to 30 million years ago, there was a lot of stretching of the Earth's crust around here, from the southwest into Nevada. It was pretty interesting. So there was some upward forces underneath that caused this whole area to kind of rise up and stretch out. And what happened was a bunch of cracks formed. So there are faults in the Earth's crust that formed. So you end up having a basin and range situation set up because you have all these cracks in the crust and they're stretching. And in between the faults, land will drop down and create some basins, and you've got mountains on both sides. So you have ranges and basins in between. All around here you have these mountains that pop up with basins in between. And then there was this thing called the detachment fault. So they said the mountains rose so fast that the whole side detached and slid down and moved west. So the mountains west of Tucson, the Tucson Mountains, were actually east of the Rincon Mountains way back in the day, they figure. And so what you end up happening is you had layers above other layers. These younger rocks slid off, and the older rocks were exposed. And so what you ended up happening was this right here, this Tanque Verde Ridge. These rocks are super old, 1.4 billion years estimated. This is some granite. Granite's magma that's solidified underground, and then it had an upper layer that slid off that way. And so these rocks below it are actually younger than the rocks above it. Pretty interesting. It's definitely dry and hot out here for a long period of time, from basically spring until the monsoon season kicks in at the end of summer.
What is this monsoon I speak of? Well, monsoon means a seasonal change in wind pattern, and it's mostly famous around India. There's a huge monsoon around there, but there's also a North American monsoon that is significant. How does this work? Well, mostly has to do with air over land warming up a lot more than air over nearby water. Water temperatures don't change that much in an ocean, and so it affects the air above it. So it'll keep the air cooler than hot air over land. The monsoon is similar to how a sea breeze works, actually. So when you have those heat that develops over land compared to over the water, the heat over land causes warm air to rise, and a thermal low pressure system develops at the surface in the desert southwest. And air at the surface is trying to fill that in, so it'll start moving from areas south of the desert southwest out toward the eastern Pacific, west of Mexico out there, and start moving in to this area of low pressure, bringing up humid air. So you get a lot of thunderstorms toward the end of the summer in the desert southwest, and you can imagine with all the rock canyons and rivers in this region, you get flash floods. All of a sudden you get a real intense flow of the rivers through these canyons, and that ain't no joke.
One of the things that's really cool about this area is that the climate is so different from the base to the top of the mountains. The top of the Sky Island, they get snow up there. This morning, they got some snow. Pretty cool. Back here, we've got the Santa Catalina Mountains, north of Tucson, with Mount Lemmon, 9,000 plus feet up there. And there's actually a ski area up there, the southernmost ski area of the U.S. So that's pretty cool to think that there's a ski area at Tucson, basically. All right, one of the great things about Saguaro National Park is that it's right next to Tucson. It's cool that they have access to this. And I've got 2 very important people here who live very close to this park. They introduced me to this awesome place. This is my dad, and this is my mom. So I want to hear some cool stories, like some interesting experiences you've had here, and also some wildlife stories. There's some really cool wildlife here. I haven't seen much besides some birds, but I want to know more about the wildlife. Heard you guys have a few things to say about that. So what do you say, Dad?
Well, we've been here for 17 years, nearly 18 years now, and we've seen several different types of wildlife out here. Predominantly, there are javelina, there are rattlesnakes, there are desert tortoises, yes, and we've also seen the world-renowned Gila monster. He is pretty cool. We'd never seen anything like that. We also see a lot of tarantulas when we go out for walks in the evening. It's really amazing that those things are out there, and they look scary, but they're really not. They're pretty interesting to watch. Out here in the park, you see a lot of these different types of critters and animals out here. There's several of them around. You really have to be careful, especially in the warmer parts of the year, because these things will hide underneath rocks and everything else. So you really got to be careful with them.
Yes, one night we were going for a walk, and we heard a crunching, and we looked over, and there was a javelina eating the acorns under the tree, and he was eating. He was too busy. He wasn't paying much attention to us, and then a few days later we went outside, and there he was, just 2 houses down from us, and he was busy eating the acorns there, and then he went across the street and started eating the petals from the cactus, and
They just chomp down on those things, even
they
though they're
just
thorns.
chopped down, and then he took off running down the street, and he sounded like a horse trotting down the street. But that was pretty cool to see him.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Not too many people can say they've seen javelinas come right in their neighborhood. But I'd like to see one. I've never seen one, but they look pretty interesting. All right. Well, thanks for the stories. All right, I had a great time at Saguaro National Park. I hope you guys thought it was cool. This is a very unique, interesting, awesome place. The Swirl Cactus is definitely cool, but also the mountains. It's a total different world once you get up the mountains. And this is only the Saguaro National Park East. There's 2 parts to this park. There's the west part and west of Tucson. So that's a whole nother thing, but there's a lot more we could do and talk about here. But that's all I got time for. But hopefully you'll come check it out, because this place is awesome, and I had a great time learning about it. All right, see ya.